I'm James Cameron, and I want to take you into a world of cold, darkness, and unrelenting pressure. The movie business. Let's roll camera. This is scene 59, take one. And action.
The Roots of the Abyss dig deep into Cameron's childhood. His knack for science won him so many accolades that his teachers shipped him off to a lecture series at the University of Buffalo. One lecture, given by a diver, featured a documentary on liquid oxygen experiments.
Mouse can survive unharmed for hours, completely submerged. The mouse is breathing a special, highly oxygenated liquid chemical compound.
This idea, revolutionary for underwater exploration, aimed to help the human body withstand pressure changes. Though the experiments didn't yield groundbreaking results, they sparked the imagination of a 17-year-old Jacques Cousteau fan who penned a short story that very evening. A team of scientists testing liquid oxygen in an underwater lab.
They were going deeper and deeper and deeper, and they kept getting lost. In my story, the last guy has lost touch with the rescue operation that's gone down to find the others.
Fast forward 2 decades, that teenager, now one of America's hottest directors.
James Cameron.
Fox, the studio Cameron had rescued from financial ruin, was eager to fund any project he pitched. Instead of diving into the next blockbuster, James took a pause, contemplating his most ambitious idea yet. He spent vacations scuba diving in the Cayman Islands, not just for fun, but as prep for a screenplay based on that old story.
I love that story. Now, I can't find it. I know it's in some box somewhere, but then years later, I revisited that idea and started to write The Abyss as we now know it.
A nuclear submarine sinks under mysterious circumstances. Right. You've got a crew of oil rig divers on the bottom of the ocean who get called in to find out what the hell's going on. And they start coming in contact with another intelligence.
We talking little space friends here?
But no, this wasn't aliens underwater, no monsters bursting from the seafloor. The Abyss was the anti-aliens, where humans were the real monsters poised to destroy the world with their arms race and endless wars. Even the aliens would be the opposite of xenomorphs. No gaping maws ready to devour. Instead, eyes filled with horror as we tore each other apart. But enough philosophy. Cameron spun a complex plot around this concept. Storms, military, tough guys, psychotic breakdowns, alien contact, the threat of global annihilation, and a couple on the brink of divorce. Fox was all in.
The easiest way to describe The Abyss would be to say that this is an outer space adventure that takes place not in outer space, but at the bottom of the ocean.
The big question was how to film it. Any open water filming invited Murphy's Law. What could go wrong would go worse underwater.
There's no such thing as an easy shot underwater. Of course, I've always felt there's no such thing as an easy shot, but underwater, multiply that by 1,000.
Just look at Jaws. A 2-month shoot ballooned into nearly 6 with costs soaring. The shark broke down, lighting was a nightmare, the weather never cooperated.
It's not the time it takes to take the take that takes the time. It's the time it takes between the takes that takes the time that takes to take.
The only film with decent underwater scenes was The Deep, a Jaws cash-in.
And so I went to the guy that shot The Deep.
Enter Al Giddings, the giant of underwater cinematography and Cameron's first recruit.
His eyes were like a deer in the headlights. It's like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Couldn't be building sets in the ocean. We looked at tanks. There was no tank big enough, no tank deep enough.
Typical Hollywood tanks were too small for Cameron's vision. Their ocean depths found an unlikely home, a half-built Cherokee nuclear power plant in South Carolina. Producer Earl Owensby had bought it to convert it into an indie studio and offered James its massive rectangular turbine pits.
And Al and I get out there and we look down. It's a giant tank. And we look at each other like, we're going to shoot in there.
It looked like it would work, and we called in engineers and said, can we turn this into a tank? Because it wasn't really a tank. It wasn't presented to us as a tank. All we knew that it was a big hole in the ground.
These pits, soon filled with 7.5 million gallons of water, would become Deep Core, the largest underwater set in movie history. It became their home for 2.5 grueling months. They also built tanks for miniatures and ventured to the world's largest underground lake, the Bon Terre Mine in Missouri. In a few months, Cameron turned a childhood fantasy into a tangible project. Next up, casting the main characters.
I told all the actors, when we cast a picture, look, you got to expect losses.
The problem, of course, was that no one takes you quite seriously until they're in the midst of it, and they realize what they've embarked on.
At the heart of The Abyss is a couple on the brink of breaking up, Bud and Lindsay. Cameron weaved a sincere and deep love story into this sci-fi epic, maybe drawing inspiration from his own life. He and Gail Hurd had lost their spark. The Abyss would reunite Bud and Lindsay, spoiler alert. But for Gail and James, it marked the final act of their marriage.
So I think our career followed, meeting, falling in love, and then we made The Abyss when we were divorcing.
But let's get back to the actors.
You could be more specific.
Fox wanted an A-list star for Deep Core's captain, suggesting Harrison Ford, Kurt Russell, and Mel Gibson. But Cameron chose Ed Harris.
Terribly sorry. What happened?
He was the real deal, looking every bit the rugged oil worker with piercing blue eyes.
All right, let's get ready to meet.
Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who had charmed audiences in Scarface and The Color of Money, was cast as his wife.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm not.
Before filming, Cameron gave Mary and Ed a special gift. Sci-fi author Orson Scott wrote 3 chapters detailing their characters' lives before the movie's events, helping them understand their relationship better.
You want to know what I think?
Not particularly.
Most other roles went to relatively unknown faces, but Cameron saved one part for an old friend, Michael Biehn. His crazed look became one of the Abyss's hallmarks.
What did you do to, keep your sanity during the shooting?
I'm not sure if I had my sanity.
Does this strike anyone as particularly psychotic, or is it just me?
Before filming, all actors went through diving courses and got their licenses.
And everything went fine. Ed turned out to be a gifted diver. Mary, not so much. But she did it. She was a total pro. The other actors, I remember, really enjoyed the helmet training.
I never really thought of that as work. To me, it was an experience like a lot of people won't ever have.
Within a week or so, it was like they were like every other commercial diver I've ever been around,
It was sort of like the glee that young soldiers have before they go to war. They got all their equipment, they're special. We knew we were special.
Excited at first, they admired the director, but within months, they were cursing him, realizing they were in for a tough ride.
We're going to be here a long time, because this is not going to be on schedule, I guarantee you that.
Let's go step by step. Locations chosen, actors cast. Now for the tricky part. Before filming could start, there were inventions to make, patents to file, and challenges to tackle that seemed like science fiction themselves.
There was always, you won't believe what's going to show up today.
First up, talking underwater.
I seem to be having a problem here.
Divers need their breathing apparatus, making clear dialogue tricky. Post-production dubbing is for wimps, so designer Ron Cobb, who had designed spaceships for aliens, created a helmet prototype supplying air from the side. Western Space and Marine took this design and made it work. By the start of filming, each actor and James had a helmet with an oxygen supply, microphone, and speaker. So yes, the actors really talked underwater.
Test, 1, 2, 3, 4. First recorded dialogue underwater on film for a theatrical motion picture in the history of the world.
The only tweak was adding bubbling sounds to replace technical noises.
Jim's talking and you got the...
Anyone in a helmet makes that sound. If they stop making that sound, we worry.
Next, lighting. Sunlight doesn't reach deep underwater, and any external light would ruin the illusion.
And the very stillness created an almost mirror surface. So we literally saw ourselves reflected in a giant 200-foot diameter mirror.
They covered the massive pool with a tent and filled it with millions of tiny black plastic beads to block the light.
We used beads instead of something laying in the water because of the safety factor. We had to be able to surface at any moment if we had a problem, especially diving with actors.
A severe storm later destroyed the tent, forcing night shoots, and those pesky beads turned into the crew's nightmare. finding their way into everything.
That all of us, I'm sure, have somewhere tucked deep in the folds of our bodies still to this day.
Cameron used the lamps on the underwater base, submersibles, and divers' helmets for light.
I mean, you had technologies where you had to bring motion picture lights down into the water and not kill anyone with electric bolts. You know, it was a lot of power down there.
All my life I was told, like, don't stand in a puddle of water and turn a light on because you'll get electrocuted. They were able to take these huge lights underwater and light completely underwater.
The Abyss, we had the first underwater HMI lights. Pete Romano and Rich Mula developed these beautiful HMI lights. I don't think Jim could have lit that set without those.
This marvel not only passed Cameron's test, but soon lit up other film sets, National Geographic documentaries, and NASA training pools.
Like a dance of light.
With underwater speech and lighting sorted out, the next challenge was filming it all. On land, smooth shots come from cranes or tracks, but underwater, it's trickier. Cameron's brother Mike, a mechanical engineer, designed the Sea Wasp, a device propelling a user underwater. It could hit 3 knots, easily move up and down, pull 2 people, and let the cameraman focus on the shot. The brothers patented the device, and James rewarded Mike with a cameo as a drowned submariner with a crab crawling out of his mouth. Ew.
Oh, jeez.
Filming The Abyss was set to start in August of 1988, but the sets under construction since April lagged behind. Deep core was being finished while the tank filled with water, a process that took over a week.
It's an historic moment.
Set decorators worked waist deep in water on the station while Cameron shot miniatures of the submarine and the alien ship in a nearby tank. The submersibles, 1/4 scale models, had all the functionalities of full-size vessels. They had engines, moved underwater at 4 knots, and withstood collisions. Steve Johnson's team, known for Ghostbusters, created the alien puppets. Cameron wanted glowing aliens, so each puppet had hundreds of fiber optic bundles all gathered into a main cable on the figure's back, lit by a powerful projector with moving colored filters. Up to 40 puppeteers operated these intricate creations.
But when you have to actually make it function underwater, it's a whole other story. I mean, water basically just adds a level of difficulty to any human endeavor, no matter what it is.
The crown jewel of the props was the 7-ton model of the Benthic Explorer, filmed at sea.
The surface craft that was created was so large it actually had to get a Coast Guard license number, even though it was a quote-unquote miniature.
By late August, filming finally began. Grueling 16-hour days were spent almost entirely underwater.
Now, the dive shooting is really exhausting. It's got to be the biggest sort of physical and mental challenge I've ever had, because I've got to do all my normal stuff, and then I've got to do it underwater, in a medium 800 times denser than air.
Oxygen tanks were refilled on site, and actors sometimes spent up to 5 hours underwater without a break.
Well, I'm sure somebody else talked about this. It was something called Diver's Delight. When you're down there for 3 or 4 hours, there's certain hygiene considerations that come up.
Diver's Delight, of course, that's pissing in your wetsuit. It all went down your leg and came up on your body, and it just felt really warm. It was a nice feeling. Everybody did it, 45 people pissing in their wetsuits. I mean, it was amazing.
Cameron often stayed in the tank all day. After long periods at a depth of 10 meters, he needed an hour for decompression. Decompression involves stops at various depths to safely ascend and prevent decompression sickness by allowing gases to escape tissues. But James didn't waste time. He reviewed the day's footage and handled studio calls during that period. Pressure wasn't the only danger. Continuous exposure to chlorine gave all the divers severe itching and changed their hair color.
Everybody got their hair bleached white. The hair fell off our arms, and we all got chlorine burns, and it was borderline kind of having to go to the hospital. It was just hell. And that's how we started. And then it goes.
It sucks.
Drowning was the biggest fear.
We did have one incident where I almost drowned.
Cameron himself had a close call. His oxygen tank was nearly empty, but he wasn't informed, even though protocol required a 15-minute warning.
Jim, check your air for me, will you?
His air supply suddenly ran out, and he couldn't call for help. Tearing off his helmet, destroying the expensive equipment inside, he swam to the surface. A safety diver noticed him and, thinking Cameron was panicking, grabbed him and offered an oxygen hose. Unfortunately, it was faulty and filled Cameron's lungs with water. Unable to communicate the problem, Cameron punched the diver and freed himself. Miraculously, he made it to the surface. After coughing up water, he fired the AD responsible for monitoring his tank and the diver who hadn't checked the hose. Then he demanded a new helmet and went back to work.
I always say to everybody at the beginning of a movie, welcome to my nightmare. My imagination is now going to be your enslavement for the next few months.
Despite this nightmare, Cameron was at least an experienced diver. The actors had much less experience and faced even tougher challenges.
Here we go. Take a deep breath, Emmy.
They performed dangerous stunts themselves.
And regulator out. And action, action.
Master Antonio held her breath for one scene.
That's a cut.
While Harris and Leo Burmester did the same and swam 40 feet. Only when they signaled they couldn't breathe did rescue divers come to their aid from off-screen.
So he's not going to be there the second you go like this, but it seemed like an eternity. It certainly expanded our ideas of what we could do.
Harris had the worst luck. Remember the liquid oxygen from Cameron's teenage story? It made it into the abyss, but it doesn't actually work in real life. So Bud's helmet in the final part of the movie was filled with dyed water.
Fluid breathing suit. Are you actually breathing under the liquid? No, you just pretend.
Harris held his breath and wore special contact lenses to see underwater. In one take, the safety diver responsible for his air hose got tangled in cables.
Did this sign, out of air, unhook myself, get over to the wall. I got no air. I'm waiting for air, and this guy's hung up somewhere. I got nobody to give me air.
When Harris signaled he couldn't breathe, another diver rushed in but inserted the hose upside down, causing Harris to inhale water twice.
And for a split second, I really thought I was a goner, and then Al came swimming over. The cameraman put his regulator in the right way, took a big breath, and went, oh, man, okay, let's go up for a second. But I remember driving home that night, and I just broke down, man. I was just weeping. And I really thought I was gonna die for a second. And though it never got that dangerous again, I always knew I was gonna have to go back down in this fucking fluid breathing suit.
6 months later, during the promo tour for The Abyss, journalists asked Harris how actors were treated on the set, and he replied, "It's like asking a soldier how he was treated in Vietnam."
Maybe the conception of going into a giant filming tank and doing all this stuff and putting actors in helmets was a dumb idea. It seemed cool at the time.
Cameron ruled the set with an iron fist, running it like a dictatorship. In his relentless pursuit of the perfect shot, he pushed everyone to the brink with take after take.
And also because of the fact that Jim's a perfectionist. He wants it over and over and over.
Grueling scenes dragged on until James was satisfied with every minuscule detail.
I can sort of make the cognitive leap to what the end picture will look like. You know, it always is a glorious picture. It's the steps to get there, you know, that sometimes are pretty grueling.
The crew's morale hit rock bottom, and they scribbled abuse over abyss on their script covers. The boiling point arrived during Lindsay's resuscitation scene. All the key actors nailed an incredible performance from the first take, but Harris's hand obscured Master Antonio's face. Cameron, ever the perfectionist, ordered a reshoot. Another torturous take followed, where the character's raw nerves contrasted sharply with Lindsay's lifeless body. Then disaster struck. The camera operator ran out of film at the worst possible moment.
She just said, hey man, we are not animals.
She runs off the set. You know, it's like, who could blame her?
Jim was pretty speechless because he knew she had every right to feel the way she was feeling, but didn't know what to say to her, you know.
They had to film the rest of the scene without her. The film's emotional peak close-ups of Bud crying and screaming had Ed Harris acting alongside a bag of sand as his partner.
There's a camera there with a big hole cut, you know, down below the floor. It's a pretty amazing piece of work.
Incidentally, not long after filming The Abyss, she drastically changed her approach to selecting roles. She abandoned big studio projects, opting only for passion projects every few years. Maybe it's a coincidence, just like the fact that none of the Abyss's actors ever worked with Cameron again.
Look, partner, we don't work for you. We don't take orders from you. And we don't much like you.
Even the animals didn't escape the stress. For the scene demonstrating the effects of liquid oxygen, they used 5 rats. And yes, they performed the experiment for real. Cameron consulted with Johan Kilstra, a top researcher in the field, who provided all the necessary knowledge to recreate the experiment on camera. The liquid was heated to the rat's body temperature and saturated with oxygen for a day.
And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to film it, which is probably not so smart because we probably should have done it off in a corner someplace in case it didn't work, but it worked. Meanwhile, the whole crew's standing around going, holy shit.
Damn rat's breathing that shit. That is no bullshit, hands down, the goddamnest thing I ever saw.
5 rats played the part of Beanie, each enduring the liquid container. The first 4 times went smoothly, but the last rat emerged from the tank lifeless. I thought, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to get that little disclaimer at the end which says no animals were harmed in the making of this film. Not with all these witnesses. To save the day, James performed mouth-to-mouth on the rat, revived it, and took it home as a pet. For real.
He lived long enough to be around for the writing of Terminator II, so he was okay.
Despite the happy ending, animal rights activists criticized the film, leading to the scene being cut from the theatrical release in 7 countries, including the UK.
Because the royal veterinarian felt that it was painful for the rats or something like that. I don't know how he knows that.
Ironically, despite all the technical breakthroughs, the impressive practical effects, The Abyss secured its place in history because of one computer graphics scene. Yes, I'm talking about the water tentacle that skillfully mimicked the faces of the main characters. This relatively simple effect by today's standards changed the course of cinematic history. Before The Abyss, CGI was mostly a stylistic tool used for opening credits or the stunning but unrealistic effects in Tron. The closest to realism came from a small effects division of George Lucas's company, a little firm called Pixar. Young John Lasseter and his team created a stained glass character for young Sherlock Holmes. When Lucas sold the company to Steve Jobs, Dennis Muren stepped in. Dennis, one of the founders of Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, the visual effects company that brought Star Wars to life, believed ILM needed its own CGI department. The Abyss was the project that would prove Muren right.
Jim was hesitant about talking to a big company like us because he's a very much hands-on person and thought he would lose control. But we're ready for something really big, and that was the perfect project.
Dennis showed Cameron some test animations, primitive but promising, and warned that the final result, consisting of 20 shots, wouldn't be ready for 9 months. Considering the best idea up to that point had been
claymation with white clay, and we'd project high-speed photography of water,
James agreed to Muren's gamble.
So he had to send John Knoll out to babysit us and make sure we didn't screw up too badly.
That was something very new for us. There were not a lot of established procedures for doing any of this work at the time, so we just dove into it and we were making it up as we went along. One of the challenges was that water is a combination of reflection and refraction. For refraction, we were going to use the background plate and distort it. But for reflection, over the course of the couple of days of shooting, I would have photographed every part of the set. But then you had to seam them all together into an environment.
Boom, Photoshop.
So we took all the images in the computer and we built in a little room, and that water tank, now it's refracting and reflecting the world.
That has become so ubiquitous today, came out of Jim pushing things for The Abyss. And if you look today on the credits of Photoshop, you will still see John Knoll's name.
It's wonderful.
The final result not only amazed the director, but also opened new horizons for filmmakers, allowing them to create not just effects, but entire worlds. A fact Cameron would later take full advantage of. Yes, 20 years later, 9 months would be needed for 2,000 shots in Avatar.
Not any easier, by the way, just faster.
But just 2 years after The Abyss, that water tentacle paved the way for the creation of the T-1000, and one of the greatest sequels in history. But back to The Abyss. After 140 grueling shooting days, it was time for post-production. Many effects still weren't ready. Test screenings included hand-drawn sketches of waves in the final scenes. No surprise, audiences laughed at the most dramatic moments.
All right, well, let's screen the one without the wave. That'll be better. And it's like, it wasn't any better.
Fox had spent over $45 million on the film, even by conservative estimates. And this wasn't the reaction they'd hoped for.
And then we thought, well, at least we could save money if we released the one without the wave.
Cameron wanted to show viewers the horrors humanity commits, addressing issues of genocide and war, while Fox wanted a summer blockbuster.
20th Century Fox hopes it's not placing $50 million plus into an abyss. This star-studded premiere in New York is but part of the studio's costly publicity splash for the movie, in hopes of helping The Abyss ride the wave of big-money summer movie blockbusters.
On August 9th, 1989, The Abyss hit theaters without the wave scenes and the parts focusing on humanity's sins, for which the aliens intended to punish us. I'll admit I've only seen the director's cut, which came out 4 years later with an additional $500,000 in funding. So I can't imagine the confusion of the audiences who left the theater after the premiere.
I think the film's really good for the first 2 hours. I think the last 10 minutes or so is really embarrassing.
Now, many people were bothered by the ending of The Abyss. One person told us it was stupid. Someone else said they'd seen it all done before and done better.
The Abyss became Cameron's first box office flop. At the Oscars, it won just one award for Best Visual Effects. But let's be honest, for 9 out of 10 directors, The Abyss would be the pinnacle of their career, something they would talk about at Comic-Con booths into their old age. For Cameron, it was just a valuable learning experience. I knew this was going to be a hard shoot, but even I had no idea just how hard. I don't ever want to go through this again.
It doesn't need to be done again. It's being done.
Cameron stepped into 1990 with mixed feelings. He faced the sting of his first major flop with The Abyss. It was a brilliant film, but in Hollywood, brilliance is measured in box office returns.
Witness. Shut up, what's wrong with you?
Yet, he also had cause for optimism. He founded Lightstorm Entertainment, his own studio named after the lighting that heralds the Terminator's arrival. Plus, he started a new relationship. Even before his divorce from Gail Hurd was final, he got involved with a woman who seemed to embody the heroines of his movies. Kathryn Bigelow, a young director brimming with strength and boldness, caught his eye. He highlighted it thanks to Bill Paxton, an old friend and collaborator, who asked Cameron to direct a music video for his band featuring Kathryn in a female version of Clint Eastwood. After finishing The Abyss, Cameron married Kathryn and, true to his nature, immediately intertwined his personal and professional life. This time he took on the role of producer, helping Kathryn secure funding for a lackluster action script titled Johnny Utah. They rewrote the script together, transforming it into a much darker action film. This collaboration marked the beginning of their disagreements. Cameron couldn't fathom why Kathryn insisted on casting the goofy guy from Bill and Ted for the lead role.
No way. Yes way, Ted!
She saw an action star in the scruffy, smiling actor. Once they cut his hair and paired him with Patrick Swayze, Bigelow ended up with one of the most surprising summer blockbusters, which later gained cult status.
The ex-presidents rip off banks to finance their endless summer.
Cameron didn't bask in his partner's success for long. Two producers, Mario Kassar and Andrew Vajna, were keen to help him make a grand return. After the success of 3 Rambo films, their company was quickly taking over Hollywood, throwing money around and snapping up talent.
To make the deal with Hemdale, I said to John Daly, would you sell me your Terminator rights? He said, well, if you give me $10 million, I would. I said, I will write you a check now.
Easy money. Come on.
Mario Kassar called me up and said, all right, we got the rights to Terminator 2. Our first choice is for you to direct it. And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, we'll pay you $6 million. I said, okay. That's pretty much how it went.
Wanting a sequel that would rival the original, they approached Cameron with a record-breaking promise to invest over $100 million in the project.
It's like going to a restaurant and you either order a great meal that costs you a lot of money, but it's worth eating it, or you go to have a hamburger for $2. I mean, it's your choice.
The catch? He had to finish the film by early July 1991 to hit the summer blockbuster season. Cameron jumped at the opportunity, especially since he already had a dusty idea for the sequel in his archives. In the original script for the Terminator, the T-800 was supposed to be killed midway through, with a liquid metal Terminator sent back in time afterwards. Cameron had initially shelved this expensive idea, thinking no one would fund such a costly venture from a newcomer. But now, with an almost unlimited budget and groundbreaking CGI from ILM, Cameron reunited with his old friend Will Wisher.
Jim called me up one day and he said, "It's good news and some bad news." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "Well, the good news is we're going to make Terminator 2. And the bad news is we're already behind schedule."
They dove into the sequel script, designing future challenges for ILM and Stan Winston's team. The more complex the scenes, the more Cameron's imagination soared.
Well, what if you did this? Oh yeah, well, what if you did that? Yeah, we could. This would be even better. It's boom, boom, boom. You get to that great idea.
But the question was, can we hang the whole movie on a soft surface character with CG?
Jim would say, "Oh, geez, I better call ILM and see if they can do this."
And I said, "Dennis, can we do this?" He said, "Yeah, we can do it." He had no idea how to do it.
He showed the finished script to the producers on a flight to Cannes, where they planned to announce the sequel.
There's only one flaw. I'm still writing at my house while everybody's showing up at the plane. And I remember literally pulling the script out of the printer and racing to the airport and getting there like 20 minutes late.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was also on that flight. Cameron had convinced him to reprise his role almost immediately.
I hand it to Arnold, say happy reading, you know, and then I go straight to sleep.
My first thought was, bullshit.
After his iconic turn as the ruthless machine, Arnold hadn't slowed down, solidifying his action hero status in Predator, The Running Man, and Total Recall, and commanding over $10 million for the sequel.
Excellent.
Even that hefty sum didn't fully ease his concerns. Arnold worried that turning the T-800 into a good guy might tarnish his original character. He even asked Cameron to have the T-800 kill a couple of people before meeting John, but the director stood firm.
Now you're the good guy, you're the defender, you're the protector. He said, okay, all right. Can I shoot him in the leg? I said, yeah, let's just shoot him in the leg. How's that? He goes, oh, that's good.
He'll live.
Linda Hamilton didn't think twice about coming back for the sequel. Cameron caught her attention with a simple plot. Sarah Connor, almost a machine herself now, must protect her son while being locked up in a mental hospital. To prepare, Linda trained for 4 months with a retired Israeli commando.
So I put her with a guy named Uzi Gal, now acting as a trainer.
The idea is that we don't look at that as a movie. We look at this as a mission. You have to think like the character that you're going to be. Either it's your first nature or you're not going to do it. It's got to be your instinct.
He was very experienced. He knew exactly how to train her, how to run and how to climb and how to do fighting scenes.
And he taught her weapons handling.
It was really like entering the military and learning the mindset and coming up against myself.
When she finished with him and she went out for her first day of actual live firing, she put the magazine in, charged it, put 8 rounds right through the center mass of the target.
Magazine!
Very nice. And the groups were pretty good, about like that. And she had never fired a gun in her life.
She was 100% there, and she was very determined to learn and was very much into it.
Out of the car! Right now!
A few days before we start shooting, Jim Cameron says to me, let's all get together and have a nice dinner. Linda comes in and she takes her sweater off, and I'm looking at her arms, veins on the biceps. Everything was like a bodybuilder except miniature.
I do remember the fierce pride that I had to show to Arnold.
There isn't a higher compliment than praise from the Terminator himself.
I said, I can't believe that son of a bitch is fucking more cut than me.
But it was Cameron who was most taken with Hamilton. Their romance blossomed during filming, though they denied it fiercely at first. They only came clean after the movie was released and Cameron had divorced Catherine Bigelow.
I bet.
Casting John Connor was the toughest challenge. The search spanned the entire country with hundreds of boys auditioning. Edward Furlong, however, was found right on the street. Casting agent Mally Finn, then a rising talent scout, snapped his picture and brought him in for an audition. That single Polaroid secured Mally's place in every Cameron film thereafter.
She literally just went out to find raw, untried talent. His auditions were very rocky. He was completely untrained, but I kept seeing something when I'd zoom way in on him with the video camera.
Eddie had everything the script needed. Like his character, he grew up without a father and was apart from his mother.
Come on, get your ass inside. Do what your mother tells you.
She's not my mother, Todd.
Cameron wasn't impressed at first and continued searching, but Finn hired a speech coach for Furlong and brought him back for another reading a few weeks later.
She came over to my house and she said, Jim almost wrote you off the list, but, you know, you need another chance. And I took it very seriously and I just went balls to the wall.
This time, Eddie nailed it. He cried on cue, sassed back convincingly, and maintained unbroken eye contact with Cameron.
What's wrong with your eyes?
Nothing. And Jim said, Eddie, don't tell anybody, but we picked you for this film. And I felt like hugging Jim, but he's a guy, so I didn't hug him.
Why?
What do you mean why? 'Cause you can't.
Why?
Because you just can't, okay? Trust me on this.
Then there was the liquid Terminator.
Heroes are measured against the villain. So how are you going to have something that's scarier, deadlier than Arnold as a T-800 Terminator?
Well, I wanted to find someone who would be a good contrast to Arnold. If the 800 series is a kind of human Panzer tank, then the 1000 series had to be a Porsche.
Initially, he didn't even know what the character would look like. Stan Winston, who worked on the effects, couldn't grasp how the villain could be just a liquid mass and urged Cameron to give the antagonist a solid form. That's when Cameron had a revelation. The Terminator should be a cop. Who could be more terrifying in early 90s Los Angeles than a police officer? This wasn't a joke, it was a sharp psychological insight. Cops embodied power and a lack of empathy. Cameron initially saw Billy Idol in this role. Early sketches depicted Idol in a police uniform. Cameron even reached out to Idol's agents, but a broken leg from an accident ruled him out. This misfortune paved the way for Robert Patrick, who landed the most iconic role of his career.
If you think about it, if the way to be introduced to the world is as a Terminator, kicking the shit out of Arnold Schwarzenegger, tell me another role that's as cool as that.
Before meeting Cameron, Patrick had played a few villains in Roger Corman's films and had a role as a terrorist in the sequel to Die Hard.
Hey, asshole, what do I look like to you? A sitting duck.
But it was the T-1000 that would forever change his life. With a few lines and a cold, emotionless stare, Patrick's portrayal sent chills down the spines of generations of fans of this future classic.
The thing I like about Robert was he kind of looks like a cat. It's almost like it's about senses with him. You know, you feel that he's very in touch with the world and analyzing it and observing it.
I invented the process right there. I showed them what the T-1000 would look like.
There was a zen calm about him, and that calm made him scary.
Damn, you all right?
Robert created something pretty amazing.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Patrick really threw himself into preparing for his role. He even mastered the art of running while breathing only through his nose, aiming to look more robotic. Patrick became so adept at this technique that he once ruined a take.
We had a shot where Eddie was on the motorcycle that was being pulled by the insert car. Jack Carpenter, the insert car driver. I said, no, he's not going to catch us. I said, he's going to catch us.
First time we did the run, I caught the... How fast you running? I have no idea.
I said, okay, we can't use that take. John Connor just died and the world just ended.
Yet what cemented Patrick's place in cinematic history wasn't his speed, but the behind-the-scenes work of countless artists.
They only had 9 months, which was really the scary part. To do these really complicated shots, they had to create the new technology, then they had to apply it and get it done on a schedule.
James Cameron brought together two powerhouse teams to create the film's groundbreaking special effects. Visual effects fell to ILM under Dennis Muren, while Stan Winston handled practical effects.
It was a constant, little juggling act in the very beginning to figure out what was going to be done optically, what was going to be done as a real-life effect, and then what things from us would be needed for ILM to help them work things out optically, and vice versa. And it just worked out as perfect as it possibly could have.
Stan Winston would start the effect, the CG would do the hard part, let's say one of the shotgun wounds healing or a head changing geometry in some way that a physical puppet couldn't do. And then he would carry on after that, where we had various types of rubber suits that had been vacuum metallized so that they were reflective as if they were liquid metal, and in quick cuts we got away with it.
Although ILM had tested efforts for the T-1000's morphing during The Abyss and Ron Howard's Willow, Terminator II posed a fresh challenge. They made an exact replica of Patrick, scanning him with a large laser over 3 days.
Robert was great. He came up to ILM in San Francisco before we started the show. He was a great sport, and whatever crazy thing we asked him to do, he did it.
I'm sitting in a chair, like this, and I've got to stay totally controlled, hit this emotion, and lock on this expression, like, ah.
We got Robert, and he was up here, and we painted a grid on him and shot a lot of footage of him, and we could see how the grid moved as his muscles moved and his bodies moved around.
And we sort of decided to concentrate on the Robert Patrick form, because Robert is the T-1000. We decided we're going to study his body, we're going to find a way to capture his quality, and that was, for us, was going to be the key that drove our visual approach to the whole T-1000.
They wanted to know, how did I think that I would come up out of the floor? So I remember them putting like a Mylar blanket over the top of me and coming up, almost like a flower, and just...
The standout shot featured the liquid Terminator emerging from the fire. It was filmed twice, once with the actor and once without. The operator had to replicate the exact movements each time, succeeding only after 20 takes. But the effort paid off. The sparks reflections on the T-1000's body showcased the future of this technique.
No cut. It's impossible. You've never seen it.
For the scene where the T-1000 melts into the floor, they created a utility called Make Sticky, which allowed flat images to adhere to 3D models and deform accurately for reflection mapping. They also crafted the scene where the T-1000 slips through metal bars, overlaying the digital model onto Robert Patrick himself and switching seamlessly between the real and digital actor.
Then the gun doesn't go through, to remind you that it's something special.
For the scene where the T-1000 flows into the helicopter cabin, they simply reconfigured the software used in The Abyss.
Get out.
Beyond the T-1000, ILM handled color correction, removed wires, added lightning and laser beams, and even cleaned the film negatives of physical damage.
Thanks for your cooperation.
For all the credit we give to the digital wizards, the real magic came from blending those effects with practical ones.
And action!
Take the bullet holes on Patrick, for instance. Those were made with rubber gadgets triggered by tiny explosions and springs, all hidden under his clothes. This setup, dubbed the bullet hit shirt, was later enhanced by CGI to make the wounds heal. Then there were the T-1000's injuries. Winston's team created a bunch of creepy puppets for different stages of his damage. Remember the donut head, the splash head, and the bisected one? Those things probably gave anyone visiting the workshop nightmares. And Arnold had his own set of puppets too.
Okay, you don't get paid, so what? I make it for you, okay? Relax.
The highlight being the bust used in the scene where they take out the processor.
Do it.
You probably know it, but there was no actual mirror in that scene. Linda Hamilton's twin sister stood in as Sarah's back, while the puppet doubled for Arnold. The actors practiced this bit for over 2 weeks to get the timing just right. And speaking of iconic scenes, there's the one where T-800 gets shot. To take all these shots, they created a life-sized puppet operated by 2 off-screen technicians.
For this, consider the fact that it's going to be good shots. It'll only be on picture.
They also reused a trick from the first movie where Arnold peels the skin off his robotic hand, which was attached to his shoulder. In the initial shot, he cut his real arm with a hollow knife, complete with fake blood. And speaking about makeup, it played a big role too, especially for Arnold. For the last part of the film, he spent up to 5 hours in a makeup chair every day.
I don't know how much longer I can take this.
He doesn't complain.
All right. But I need my foot massages. I'm too handsome. No camera can take all these good looks. So what they do in every movie basically is they put appliances on to kind of tone my looks down a little bit, so I match up to the rest of the actors in the movie. All right.
Wow! 2.5, 3 hours and he's done. The next stage for the makeup, it's basically the same that Arnold had before, just more chrome, more appliances. He'll have his eye plugged up so he won't be able to see out of it. And it'll take probably an hour, hour and a half longer to put on. He's gonna love it.
Holy shit.
I need a vacation.
But let's return to the T-1000, specifically the iconic Hasta la Vista shot. Winston created a detailed fiberglass model filled with metallic flakes and urethane foam shards. The first attempt to blow it up flopped due to smoke clouds ruining the shot. Cameron then placed 2 powerful fans above the model to clear the smoke. The second attempt? Perfect.
Hasta la vista, baby.
After this, the liquid metal reassembles. For these scenes, Cameron's old friends Robert and Dennis Skotak handled the close-ups. They first dissolved pieces of lightweight metal and then replaced them with mercury, merging it together. Due to mercury's toxicity, only Robert handled it, despite the final shot taking just a few takes. He ended up in the hospital with mercury poisoning.
The need for having mercury doing something that it doesn't want to do were among the most frustrating things to have to shoot.
The Skotak brothers also handled the miniature nuclear explosion. Their work impressed even federal nuclear weapons testing lab experts who called it the most realistic on-screen nuke, a title that Christopher Nolan would claim only 3 decades later. The wide shot was a combination of early particle generators and hand-drawn city images, while the close-ups were the Skotak's work.
We found ourselves having to come up with materials for the insides of the building that could be mass-produced and assembled crudely but visually effectively. We found that matzo crackers were in the right scale for rooms. They had the little segment lines so we could break them up and glue them in, and they were cheap. We had balsa wood chunks, plaster pieces. We also found that various types of cereals like shredded wheat and cornflakes were spray painted because, again, that looks like broken masonry. Facing across from the miniature buildings about 9 feet away was a row of air cannons and several Ritters and E-fans. We found ourselves augmenting all of these with upwards of 25 or 30 cables attached to the back of the set. All these wires also pull the model apart internally. In addition, we layered in several exposures of particles blown across the frame with an air cannon.
We essentially did 3 cameras photographing the entire setup at once. It was either 8 or 9 times that we did those over.
Winston's team crafted and burned dolls, using pneumatic guns to tear the skin off of Sarah. Stan admitted that even he felt creeped out during these shoots, which says something when coming from a man who created this, and this.
It was very unsettling. And it was the one time when you got a little uncomfortable because it wasn't pleasant to look at while you were shooting it. But it is the important aspect of the film.
We've talked a lot about the pre-planned scenes, but even without those, the movie had its share of epic moments. Take the prologue, for example. It showcased the future war in all of its terrifying glory with real, controllable T-800 models marching across the screen.
It's the same endoskeleton, but it's much more technically advanced than the endoskeleton in the first movie. It's actually artistically advanced, so they can do more. There's more life to these endoskeletons.
They paid homage to the first film by using old-school stop-motion animation for the background machines. The foreground, though, was where the magic happened. One T-800 had a spike in its foot designed to crush a skull on contact. Knowing Cameron's penchant for multiple takes, Winston's team molded 28 wax skulls for this shot. By 3 a.m., after the 26th take, a frustrated Cameron called it a night. The team braced for a meltdown tomorrow when the skulls ran out. To everyone's relief, the next morning, Cameron declared that take 5 was perfect. Phew!
It looks pretty spectacular.
Then there's the legendary arrival scene from the future. For this, they used 2 identical trailers. In the first part of the shot, they used a normal trailer. Then they stopped the camera, switched to a trailer with a section cut out, and dug a hole in the asphalt. The first major action scene? Oh, you know, just a casual chase through the valley flood channels packed with dozens of dangerous stunts.
I had a specific image for that sequence, which was you're a rat in a maze and you can't get out. And if you've ever been in one of those drainage systems, once you're in, you're kind of stuck there for a long time.
Fun fact, the truck's roof wasn't originally supposed to be a convertible. But despite meticulous planning, no one had measured the height of the overpass above the channel. So Cameron, being the mad genius he is, decided to improvise. Another memorable moment, the shootout with police cars. Picture this, a pyrotechnic symphony that ends with a building explosion. Surprisingly, this wasn't a miniature, but a real explosion, which left the structure mostly intact. The secret lay in directing hundreds of liters of gasoline and barrels of powder to detonate through the windows.
Supposed to roll? That was a rehearsal. I was waiting for your cue, Jim.
Then came the highway chase, the film's most intense and challenging sequence to execute. For this scene, the team rented 5 miles of road in San Pedro, California, setting up props and lighting for a night shoot. Just when you think nothing can go wrong, someone decides to steal all the cables from the set. Enter producer Stephanie Austin, who found replacement cables faster than you can say hasta la vista, baby.
That's 5 miles of highway that they had to light. In order to do that, they had to rent pretty much every piece of lighting equipment Hollywood had.
There was no more cable available in Hollywood because we took all the cables.
Her reward? A badge with her name, Austin, on the T-1000's chest. Yet problems persisted. Midway through filming, Cameron realized the liquid Terminator didn't have enough hands to pilot the helicopter and reload his gun simultaneously. He called Winston's team in the middle of the night and they crafted a 4-armed costume from available materials on their way to the set. But wait, there's more. The helicopter pilot, a Vietnam War vet, handled the stunts like a pro, but the cameraman, not so much. Too scared to shoot the scene where the helicopter flies under an overpass, he handed the camera to Cameron, who filmed the scene twice himself, one take in front of and one behind the helicopter. The grand finale took place at a rented factory. The star prop of the scene, molten metal, was actually a mix of dramatic lighting, a translucent material called Metasil, smoke, and pyrotechnics. While Cameron managed to include almost everything he envisioned in the movie, there was one concept he had to drop: the time machine hidden deep in Skynet. But don't worry, those sketches didn't gather dust. They made a cameo in the film Contact 5 years later. Even after filming wrapped, Cameron had an incredible task ahead. He had 300 kilometers of film, hundreds of hours of footage that needed to be condensed into a feature-length movie. In the end, less than 1% of the material made it into the theatrical release. Dozens of scenes were left on the cutting room floor.
There's not much time left in the world, Sarah.
One of the things I always feel strongly about in a sequel is that it shouldn't require you to have seen the first film. It should be self-contained.
You're strong, Sarah. Stronger than you ever thought you could be. On your feet, soldier.
It didn't surprise me that this didn't make the cut, because you've only got so much movie, and it's not part of the storytelling. It's more of like, well, remember this.
From a vision that showed Sarah Connor's sensitive side to numerous episodes featuring the T-1000. Honestly, those T-1000 scenes were better off cut. In the director's cut, Robert Patrick's character mimics human emotions too much, which makes him less scary.
Do you have a photograph of John?
Yeah, sure, hold on.
Another crucial part of post-production was sound design. All the pricey effects by ILM and Winston Studio got a major boost from Gary Rydstrom's creativity.
Sounds that seem organic and real, but they're bigger than anything you've heard before. It's sound effects with a lot of testosterone. Different layers are chosen for being exactly the right sound for that layer. So there's a lot of details that go into making something that you then believe has been recorded on the set.
The shape-shifting sound, that was dog food falling out of a can.
The ILM effect, which is brilliant, I don't know what it costs, but a lot. And the sound effect is about 35 cents.
Even more amusing is that Gary, along with the visual effects wizards, snagged an Oscar for the film. But that came later. First, Terminator II hit theaters on the planned weekend right before the 4th of July and raked in over $30 million. More than half of all tickets sold that weekend were for James's new film. Soon, T2 would gross over $500 million worldwide and make untold amounts from VHS sales and merchandise.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Once again, Cameron built on the success of the first film. Just like with Aliens, he expanded the fan base without upsetting the original's devotees.
So we took a shot at it, and we are very delighted that everyone, if it is the critics or the people that have seen it, think it is better than the first one. So that's what we want to do, is entertain people all over the world.
What did anger fans, though, were the endless sequels that squeezed every last cent from the franchise's most loyal followers.
I came from a future like that. It failed.
It's worth mentioning, though, that Cameron himself was the first to toy with the story when he released a 12-minute sequel titled T2 3D, Battle Across Time, in 1996.
So you're going to see a step in the evolution of the story and of the characters in T2 Battle Across Time, which may be finished in the third film.
This 3D attraction, created exclusively for theme parks, was designed to showcase the potential of 3D before it became a big thing. The production cost a record $60 million, though today it looks, to put it mildly, quite cringy. The plot involves John going to the future to destroy Skynet's main computer. The presentation is a mix of live action and filmed material with actors on stage playing the main characters, while their close-ups are shown on screens featuring recorded performances by Hamilton, Schwarzenegger, and Furlong.
Whoa, where are we? The future. The final battle between humans and machines.
The show also included real, moving models of cyborgs powered by hydraulic systems. As a theme park attraction, it was amusing, but it also certainly was nothing more than an attempt to cash in on the film's success.
Easy money.
But let's go back to 1991, when a tired of epic ideas Cameron decided to take on a smaller project, something simpler and more personal. Of course, when it comes to James, even a personal project isn't complete without an airplane on the roof of a skyscraper. When Terminator II exploded onto the scene, it didn't just open doors for James, it blew them off their hinges. Suddenly, every studio in Hollywood was clamoring to sign him. They dangled offers of creative control, bottomless budgets, and the freedom to chase down any wild idea he had. But Cameron Everett the Maverick was getting a bit weary of action flicks. He craved a new challenge, something with a bit more psychological bite.
Multiple personalities. Have you ever seen someone change personalities right in front of your eyes?
Enter the minds of Billy Milligan, Daniel Keyes' gripping tale of a man accused of heinous crimes who pleads not guilty by reason of multiple personality disorder. Cameron was hooked. He snatched up the film rights from Sandra Akara and dived into writing a screenplay, christened it Crowded Room. He even had a meeting with Billy Milligan himself and convinced John Cusack to take on the lead role. Things were rolling.
Well, I don't see why not.
Meanwhile, 20th Century Fox finally managed to pin down the elusive director. They waived an offer he couldn't refuse, a multi-picture deal with a whopping $500 million budget. Cameron would keep the intellectual property rights, and his own company, Lightstorm Entertainment, would handle international distribution. Projects under $70 million, they'd get a green light without so much as a nod from the studio. It was a dream deal, but like all dreams, it came with a rude awakening. Just days after he inked the deal with Fox, Sandra Akara slapped him with a lawsuit. She wanted more cash, bumping the price for the rights from $250,000 to a cool $2.5 million. Her logic? With Cameron now swimming in Fox's deep pockets, she felt entitled to a bigger slice of the pie.
I don't negotiate with terrorists or extortionists, so I told her to take a flying fuck and collapse the project.
For years, Sandra Akara pitched The Crowded Room to studios, cycling through big names like David Fincher and Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Steven Soderbergh. Despite the star power, the adaptation languished in development hell. It wasn't until 2023 that the project finally saw the light of day, and by then, it had nothing to do with Sandra or Cameron's script.
What exactly are you accusing me of?
In the early 90s, Cameron kept busy churning out screenplays. His next brainchild was the dystopian thriller Strange Days.
As a writer, it's probably the most interesting film that I've done because it's so different from everything else.
Set just before the dawn of the new millennium, Cameron envisioned a future bleaker than the usual sci-fi fare, a grim reality amplified. The plot revolved around squids, superconducting quantum interference devices that allowed users to relive others' memories with full sensory overload.
The history of human technological development is we just do it, and then we find out what the consequences are.
But directing wasn't on his agenda. The script might have gathered dust if not for Kathryn Bigelow's interest. Cameron and Bigelow divorced shortly after Terminator II was released, after which Cameron openly acknowledged his romance with Linda Hamilton. They would soon have a daughter, and in 1997, they got married. However, this marriage would also be short-lived.
This is life. It's a piece of somebody's life.
Returning to Strange Days, professionally, Cameron and Bigelow remained close friends. He shared the Strange Days synopsis with her, and Bigelow was hooked.
I had an unequivocal reaction to it. It was a tremendous piece that offered so many opportunities that, you had not only something that was very accessible and explosive in its underlying framework, but you had something that had so much tenderness and vulnerability and character development, which is a great juxtaposition.
She took the helm as director, with Cameron producing and Jay Cox refining the script. The film, a dark, dynamic thriller with standout cinematography and Ray Fiennes' riveting performance, unfortunately slipped under the radar for most viewers.
Harsh and untrue.
While Cameron was deep into Strange Days, time was ticking away. It was 1993, over 2 years since T2 had hit theaters, and his lucrative deal with Fox hadn't materialized due to a lack of suitable projects.
I don't care about stuff like that.
Meanwhile, his pal Arnold Schwarzenegger was in a rut after the colossal flop of Last Action Hero.
You think you're funny, don't you?
I know I am. I'm the famous comedian Arnold Braunschweiger.
Schwarzenegger.
Gesundheit.
I remember calling Arnold on the Saturday morning, and I hadn't really read the news. I said, "So, how'd the picture open?" He said, "Terrible." He sounded like he was like in bed crying.
I was just putting myself together.
I said, what are you gonna do? He says, I'm just gonna hang out by myself. That's the only time I've ever heard him down.
Arnold needed a comeback, and fast. That's when he stumbled upon La Totale,
a little French movie that no one saw.
Comedy about a spy whose family thinks he's an ordinary clerk.
It was very entertaining and very well done. The concept is just so refreshing, so new.
Excited, he showed it to Cameron, who loved the idea of a James Bond-type character who also had to do the dishes at home.
Arnold's bringing me a project that he believes in. He'd never done that before.
Despite the original film's light action, Cameron saw the potential for intense fights and thrilling chases.
He said, let's make it big. And I said, yeah, let's make it big.
He jumped into writing the script. But there was a hitch. While Cameron's films had humor, it was usually sharp one-liners or quirky characters, not full-blown comedy.
In some ways, True Lies is one of the scariest movies that I've done because tonally, it was a comedy from the beginning, an action comedy.
Stay.
I was very nervous tonally. I wasn't that nervous about how to execute the film because we'd already done complex stuff, but I was very concerned about it stylistically.
And what the hell were you thinking?
Then came a major snag with his Fox deal.
Well, that's it then, right?
A glaring oversight in the Lightstorm contract meant Cameron needed a completion bond, a guarantee the film would finish on time and within budget. The catch? This bond could only be obtained in advanced production stages, when the studio had already spent money on actor fees, sets, costumes, and more.
That's a nice piece.
Essentially, he needed a budget to get a bond, but he needed a bond to secure the budget. This bureaucratic catch-22 spelled the end of the $500 million deal and Cameron's partnership with Lightstorm's manager. Despite the hiccup, Fox was still keen on the project. They renegotiated, transferring international distribution rights to Fox and granting Cameron a staggering $115 million budget. Yet another record for the most expensive film ever made.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Next up was casting. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the biggest action hero of the decade, was a shoo-in for the lead. For the supporting cast, Cameron rounded up some character actors and, of course, his old buddy Bill Paxton.
Hey. My dad was a traveling salesman, came up with a lot of good ideas, and I would use a lot of lines of his. I would just throw them out in a rehearsal, and Jim liked a lot of them.
See, it's not just a car, it's a total image, an identity you have to go for.
He would always bring more. Even if I shot down 9 ideas and used 1, he was happy.
Paxton had a knack for bringing a mix of chaos and charm to any project, like an uninvited guest who somehow makes the party better.
I mean, he played Simon to the hilt. I mean, Simon is a crack-up.
Absolutely.
But the real challenge? Finding the right actors for the protagonist, wife, and sidekick. Cameron needed talent who could improvise and bring their own flair, given his shaky confidence in his own comedic chops.
You know what? I think you're going about this whole thing all wrong.
Enter Tom Arnold, then known more for his stand-up comedy and high-profile marriage and divorce to Roseanne Barr.
Well, by now, you know the romance has gone out of the relationship between Roseanne and Tom Arnold. Roseanne is filing for divorce. Insiders say Tom may have taken up with another woman.
You know what? I say we concentrate on work, buddy. That's what I do every time my life turns to dog shit. I concentrate on work, and that gets me by.
Despite the modest resume and tabloid drama, Cameron was struck by Tom's wit and cast him as Gibb.
Listen, I got 2 words to describe that idea. Insane.
The studio was stunned, but Tom's performance silenced the skeptics. The real casting conundrum was finding the wife. Cameron had Jamie Lee Curtis in mind, having admired her work since Catherine Bigelow's Blue Steel.
Not bad, huh? It just was a great part, and it was perfect for me. It's got everything that I'm good at. It was incredibly physical. It was funny. It was a little sexy. And it was, at its core, a love story, sort of a domestic epic
really.
It seemed like a no-brainer, but Schwarzenegger wasn't feeling it.
Or he thought he didn't want Jamie. He said, well, she's too beautiful. Nobody's going to believe her as a housewife. Like, Arnold, leave that to me. So I started looking at every other actress.
Maybe he didn't see her comedic potential, or maybe he felt awkward about playing her love interest after recently directing her dad, Tony Curtis. Cameron spent 3 months auditioning other actresses only to rewatch A Fish Called Wanda.
And she's perfect. I mean, I thought I was going to watch 5 minutes, and I wound up watching the whole damn thing, and she was perfect. I call Arnold, say, come on over. And he sits down, says, yeah, what? I said, okay, it's Jamie. And there was a moment where he just froze. And then it was like, okay, let's try it.
And after filming, he showed his appreciation by sharing top billing with Jamie.
The movie is finished, and the phone rang. It was Jim Cameron, and he said, I went to Arnold and asked him if I could put your name above the title of the movie.
He says, you know, the movie wouldn't be what it is without her, and she's so amazing, and she deserves to be above the title.
So much effing money is spent on lawyers and agents for credits. It's a big business.
And I think that's a beautiful window into how his mind works. Very, very few people in Hollywood are like that.
It was a very moving moment for me. And that movie, of course, changed my life.
Another crucial task was picking the director of photography. Cameron went with Russell Carpenter, a relatively unknown talent whose biggest credit was Pet Sematary II.
And Eddie Furlong was in that. And Eddie Furlong's people also mentioned my name to Jim. He wanted to do a film called Crowded Room. That picture went away because of some rights problems. So off I go to New Orleans to shoot this picture with John Woo. When I'm down in New Orleans, I get a call from Jim's producer, Stephanie Austin, and she says, Jim wants to talk to you about this next project. The only next project I see is this big Arnold Schwarzenegger film called True Lies. And I'm not putting my name and that project together in the same thing. I go to this meeting, and this is the picture he's talking about. You know, he never said, would you like this? Would you be interested in doing this? Never. You know, it was just like he just said, we'll be doing this. And then in Florida, we'd probably try this technique because it hasn't been done before, but I think it can work. Shake his hand, run to the phone booth, call my wife and said, I think I was just hired to do this big thing, you know.
An unconventional pick for the priciest film ever made. But Carpenter soon realized this was a career leap and crash course in endurance. On one of the first days, Cameron reviewed the daily footage and saw that Schwarzenegger's face was not well lit in the homecoming scene. He unleashed a tirade so harsh that Carpenter called his wife, warned her that he might be fired. Colleagues convinced him not to despair, saying, Cameron treats everyone like this.
He had a fierceness that went along with his commitment to making the film. And of course I put up with it because my mantra was, I've got to have this credit. This is the biggest credit I'll ever get, you know. And then it's 20 years later and the intensity is still there, but he seemed like, in a way, he seemed like a much looser person.
Filming True Lies kicked off in August 1993 and quickly earned its stripes as one of Hollywood's most chaotic and dangerous productions.
You tango?
I said, this is your most dangerous stunt. And he knew exactly what I meant. He nailed it. He'd never done anything like that, but that's the beauty of Arnold. He doesn't care. He'll do it all.
Jamie Lee Curtis also embraced the madness.
It was all real people, real place, real time, real action. It was crazy.
Filming on Florida's 7 Mile Bridge, her character dangled from a burning limo's sunroof.
And it's a little weird to have a helicopter fly over your head and a guy like reaching his hand down and you're reaching up and grabbing and holding on, and he's pulling you and then he lets go. And none of that is a special effect. None of that is like on a soundstage. None of it. Donna Keegan, my stunt woman, does the pull-out, the actual stunt, which is insane.
At the last second, Donna slides in, she gets in position, and the thing goes off the end of the bridge.
fired up in the same rig that she was in.
Oh, don't tie it!
So it's like the shots of me going, were shot that day. It really was magical to be a part of something like that. To be able to be that person in that sequence was really, really, really exciting.
Perhaps the craziest stunt involved a jet fighter amidst Miami skyscrapers.
John Bruno was a visual effects supervisor that I had worked with over the years. He was with me on The Abyss, and he came up with this crazy idea. We were kind of doing storyboards in the pre-production, and he said, why don't we put the jet on the building?
The crew used a filming crane on a construction crane, allowing them to shoot the jet from any angle. They even justified the crane's presence by writing terrorists hiding in an unfinished building into the script.
So then we had a real jet in the real lighting in the real city, and we can get a lot of the shots.
The end result was spectacular. Although the lawyers probably aged a decade convincing the insurance companies it was necessary to put Schwarzenegger in a mock airplane 300 feet in the air. Despite the on-screen chaos, the striptease scene stole the show.
Good.
And I, of course, had to do everything in my power not to laugh because the scene was just so hilarious.
There was no choreographer. We didn't talk about it. So when he says dance for me and she starts doing the little, just made me laugh because that's what she would dance.
Jamie and I had cooked up this whole thing where she does that fall and gets back up, and he didn't know about it. And he starts to get up to help her, and then he realizes he's got to still be in character because I have it cut. And that's the take that's in the movie. You see him start to get up to help her, and then he sits back down.
What seemed like your typical Hollywood cocktail of playful intimacy and laughs had critics accusing Cameron of sexism and misogyny. Roger Ebert even called the scene
basically cruel and not very funny.
We respectfully disagree.
I'm telling you, the biggest laugh I have ever gotten in my life was from that.
Controversy didn't stop there. The portrayal of terrorists sparked outrage. The National Council on Islamic Affairs and the Committee on American-Arab Relations called for a boycott, labeling the film a pile of lies.
I'm sorry, Harry. I know this got to be painful.
Cameron's defense? The choice of nation was random, and he could have just as easily used IRA terrorists. Yet Fox was forced to add a disclaimer to the credits. As for the accusations from women, he stated that not all characters in films need to be paragons of political correctness.
That hurt, you...
However, after 9/11, Cameron shelved plans for a sequel.
It just wasn't funny anymore. I tried it. We worked on a script for a while. It just wasn't funny. And if you couldn't make it funny, it didn't seem worth it.
Only in 2023 would a True Lies reboot come out, featuring only Tom Arnold from the original cast.
Trust me, it'll go better without me.
Back to 1994. When the film originally hit the big screens, within a few months it grossed nearly $400 million despite protest and mixed reviews.
Like a phoenix rising from the dust of Last Action Hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back, stronger than ever. True Lies is true gold, claimed the #1 spot.
Variety aptly highlighted that the film was essentially 141 minutes of extravagant fodder for an enticing 3-minute trailer. But Jim and Arnold managed to go out with a bang, encapsulating the essence of 90s action comedies.
Honey, next time, duck.
Considering True Lies was their last film collaboration, they left on a high note. Schwarzenegger would flex his muscles in movies for another decade before moving into politics, while Cameron would begin working on yet another most expensive film in history.
Now, no one's ever done this before.
Stay here. I'll be back.
With more content, but only if you like, subscribe, and comment below.